Are we live?
I think so.
Okay. All right.
I thought you dropped off for
Sorry
a second,
about.
Saagar.
Yeah, it was odd. I hope this is coming through. There's a few technical difficulties on my end. I'm still hearing myself, producers. If you can go ahead and either mute me or some coming in from somewhere. I'm not exactly sure what it is. But yes, welcome everybody to our live inauguration coverage. We really appreciate you joining us. Ryan, unfortunately, not here. We do have an amazing show for everybody today. By the way, I forgot to say that it's bitterly cold in Washington D.C., so we'll be bringing everybody the coverage. But I'm really glad here to be with Krystal and with Emily. We're going to narrate some of this great unity celebration. Barack Obama, Dana White, Joe Rogan, RFK Vivek, the new cabinet, as well as all these other elected officials in the Capitol Rotunda, where Donald Trump will take the oath of office. Reminder: he will actually be president of the United States at exactly at 12:01 p.m. Eastern time, no matter if he takes the swearing in or not. That's what the Constitution, I believe that's what the Constitution says in terms of the transition. All of the pomp and circumstance, Crystal, has been happening here in Washington. President Biden said, "Welcome home" to Donald Trump when he received him on the White House steps. Interesting.
Very
What you
interesting.
would
It's
usually
a
say to
weird
a
thing to say to
fascist.
Hitler.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
certainly is. That's not exactly what I would say in terms of Hindenburg handing the
He, w-
keys to
he was
Adolf Hitler.
confused. He thought
He
he was
was
talking to
confused.
Hunter.
Well,
That's
actually,
right.
that's just like Hindenburg, actually.
That's right. That's a good point. Hindenburg was also very old. He didn't know exactly what he was doing. But look at this unity that we have in front of us. We also have Crystal. All of the tech oligarchs were very prominently well behind Donald Trump. They've been in and around Washington. Yes. Okay. Crystal, go ahead. Apparently, I'm going to fix my microphone while you take over from me.
Well, I think one of the first things that is kind of set to happen here imminently is JD Vance taking the oath of office. So that's what people are kind of gathering for right now. You see Jill Biden, you see Kamala's husband there, you see Bill Clinton. Hillary is back there kind of hidden by the Supreme Court justices. I see Kristi Noem in the background. But, you know, one of the things, there are many things, in my opinion, that are quite extraordinary about this day. One of the things, though, is that, as Saagar said, it is cold as hell in Washington, D.C. And so the proceedings have been moved indoors, which is quite rare. Once Saagar gets his mic troubles figured out, I think he can tell us that Ronald Reagan's second inauguration, I believe, was also even colder and also was moved indoors. There has been a little bit of speculation if it was not just the cold weather, but also that it did not appear that he was going to have quite the crowd that he had the first time around. And we all know that he's a little sensitive about crowd sizes. But it is kind of an extraordinary situation because you always have tens of thousands of people who make plans to come into town to support the president that they're excited is coming into office. And all of that was completely undercut. There were people who were talking to reporters who were quite upset. Even the, you know, elites who ponied up millions of dollars for Donald Trump, either in the election or directly to the inaugural committee, you know, they were having to fight for space at the Capital One Arena to watch it on a Jumbotron, et cetera. So just one of the many things that makes this a very unusual day. Emily, one of the things that I was thinking of, and then I'll get your reaction to some of this, is you know, Trump in 2016 in his inauguration gives this famous American Carnage speech. He won with this coalition that, you know, they sort of lovingly embraced the Hillary Clinton term of them as the quote unquote deplorables. The coalition this time is very different. And you see that with the choice of, you know, all these like tech robber barons who are up there on the dais with him, who have come to town, who have decided to bend the knee and get on board with the MAGA movement. You see that certainly in the H-1B visa fight and the way all of that went down. And so in a lot of ways, this, even though last time around Trump's major accomplishment in office was tax cut for the wealthy, the coalition this time and the sort of expectations for who this administration will serve and who Donald Trump is in coalition with, quite different than back in 2016.
Yeah, incredibly different. And you see that just walking around down here in DC, as I've been doing all weekend. And it's a very different crowd. The first thing that struck me is that it's a lot more affluent. And I think the reflection of that, or what that actually reflects in the coalition, is that it's broader. So it's not just, you know, a lot of people in 2016. It was like a lot of people who came from middle America, very much like in many ways similar to what you see at like a Bernie crowd. People who haven't been super engaged in politics before, definitely not Tea Partiers. But now, as you're looking at the inauguration crowd here, it is a lot of young men. One person I know, a good source, was that the Bitcoin ball on Friday night and said Snoop Dogg's best line of the evening was a legitimate question. Like he was performing there and he had a legitimate question, and it was, quote, "Where the ladies at?" There's a lot of dudes rolling around in the dark MAGA hats, like a lot of them. So it is a very, very different group than it was in 2017. It's a much less sort of, I don't want to use the word timid, but there was just this sense in DC. You probably remember, Krystal, at the time. It was like I winced every time I saw like a nice Midwestern family walking around downtown in a MAGA hat. Because I was like, this is not going to end well if you try to walk into a bar. And it's definitely not like that anymore. So it's a totally different vibe, and for better or worse, yet to be determined. But the early signs, if you're somebody who hoped that Trump's populism would stave off oligarchy, not great.
Yeah, and as we're taking a picture here of Elon Musk, who is, I think, that, thanks to the $250 million plus he put into the Trump campaign, and now he's got this position on Doge, certainly the most influential of that group, and already sort of flexing his muscles both in terms of our politics, German politics, UK politics, etc. But Snoop Dogg is a perfect example. Snoop Dogg previously said whatever black entertainer performs for Trump is an Uncle Tom. And now here he is performing at a Trump inaugural event. So, I think Trump's. So Trump's rise here this time around, it really does solidify the notion that this is no longer, Trump in 2016, it was possible this was an aberration, a one-off, that, Hillary was a bad candidate, and Comey and sexism and Russiagate and whatever, that they get him next time. And now this really does solidify that this period of time, for, whether it lasts through this next 4 years or even beyond that, which I think is quite likely, this is the Trump era. And all the brakes that may have previously been on the car are off the car. And I think probably the most emblematic point in that direction is this meme coin that he launches, and then immediately the next day launches one on behalf of his wife. Like, just absolute brazen cash grab, which, the losers of, meme coins are really just, they truly are Ponzi schemes. There is no even pretense of there's some good or service or something else you can do with this other than bet on it and hope that there are more fools that get in after you who bet on it to up the price of this. Just an absolute brazen cash grab. I know the Melania coin, 89% of it is held by one wallet. The Trump coin, 80% of it is held by insiders. And so whereas in 2016, it was, very much running against the system, running against corruption, whether any of that was real or not ever, that's another question. But that was certainly the orientation, drain the swamp, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's like, I'm going to get mine. I'm going to do it brazenly. And you're just going to have to take it, because who is ultimately going to stand in my way?
Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear me now? I've had
We got you,
I think
Saagar.
I've entered and exited now 9 different times. So I apologize. Nothing is ever easy, is it? Whenever we're live streaming from home, I have a lot more respect for these Twitch streamers out there who have these incredible setups. But from what we could see, as you guys were, the First Lady Melania Trump was going in there. I heard you guys get the Trump meme coin discourse in.
Yeah.
I'm glad we did.
Yeah. Why don't you weigh in on that, Saagar?
Oh, well, what am I supposed to say? It's pretty unbelievable, isn't it?
Well,
Listen,
even
like you just said, though,
Portnoy.
Krystal, he is the, as you said, he's term limited. This is it for him, and he can do whatever he wants, right? And we have some executive power in particular, very strong moment, I think, for the strong executive. President Biden this morning issuing those pardons, those blanket pardons for Anthony Fauci, for Mark Milley, for members of the January 6th Select Committee, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and a few others. But it is certainly an interesting thing happening right now in front of us, like you said, in terms of how different it looks. And I was actually kind of reflecting on this just over the weekend, been running around to various different events. And it's just crazy because, Emily, you and I think we were together as well a little bit in the 8 years ago, Washington, the 2017 inauguration was just so fundamentally different in terms of the way that it felt like the town was receiving Donald Trump, whereas this time all of the tech guys have been everywhere, that they have, been very prominent at many of these events, many of the corporations and others, TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, all the big companies holding parties celebrating the inauguration. Even here, like you said, Krystal, about Snoop Dogg and other entertainers who have decided to be here. Lots of big cultural figures, just people I've spotted around town. People like Joe Rogan is in the rotunda right now. You have Theo Vaughn, Jake Paul, Logan Paul, others who are like VIP
Conor McGregor.
guests. Conor McGregor, Bryson DeChambeau. Actually got to meet Bryson. That was funny. A few other people like that who I guess you just said again, would not have expected to be here. But it is extraordinary. I mean, Donald Trump will now go down as only
Look
the
at
second
how tall
president.
Barron is.
Yes,
Look at how
that's right.
seriously,
6'9".
just as that shot is on there.
Unbelievable.
That's
Yeah.
unreal. Sorry, Saagar.
Mac, you're gonna bring in some of the audio here, where we have. There we go.
We got Biden, Kamala, Hakeem Jeffries.
Right.
Deb Fisher.
Is that who that is?
Yeah.
Deb Fisher.
Yeah, I believe she's on the inaugural committee, Krystal. That's why she is coming in.
I don't know who the guy in front is.
Sergeant of Arms, I'm guessing. Either the House Sergeant of Arms or the Senate Sergeant of Arms. Usually they're the ones who I believe do the escorts. This is, again, Statutory Hall, and they're walking into the Capitol Rotunda right now. J.D. Vance, as they say on C-SPAN, will be taking the oath of office. The vice president traditionally takes the oath before the president.
All right, can we kill this singing now?
Let's kill this off.
That is Trump's. He performs at every Trump rally.
Does he really? Who is
One of
that?
his favorite acts.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I wonder what it's like to be Kamala Harris right now. I wonder what it's like to be Joe Biden right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you think about Biden. First of all, one of the many mistakes I think that the Democrats made. Obviously, we see J.D. Vance here walking in to take the oath of office. One of the many mistakes that Democrats made is that they never really tried to turn the page on the Trump era. Rather than selling the country their own separate vision, they decided that the best thing to do was to continue orienting themselves as an anti-Trump coalition. So even while Biden is in office, and of course the fact that he's like old as hell and can't talk and can't think and doesn't know where he is half the time, et cetera, played into those challenges. But they never really tried to turn the page on the Trump era because they found it politically beneficial, and they thought they were vindicated in the Biden midterms that was the most politically beneficial way for them to go. And I think the re-election of Trump obviously is an utter repudiation of that strategy. And one of the things that I've been thinking about too, and we can talk some about the TikTok thing that happened and Trump swooping in after he's the one that puts the TikTok ban on the table and he swoops in and saves TikTok, whatever, is so emblematic to me of how Democrats have just no values or principles of their own that they're actually willing to stand on. So when the polls said like, oh, people are a little bit interested in this TikTok ban, they're like, oh, we'll do TikTok. Sure, we'll do that. We'll do that. We'll pass that. We'll sign it into law. And then when the polls turn and it's like, well, actually, lots of people like TikTok and don't want this to be banned and we're really opposed to it. Then they're like, oh my God, we're sorry. Like, we don't want this TikTok ban either. We're going to try to delay it. We don't want anything to do with this. And it's just so utterly pathetic in both directions. They're just purely followers and unable to like execute on a single vision or policy or stand for anything ever. No. No.
Okay, that's that then. All right, well, let's try again. Let's get the host back up.
All right, I think we are back up. All right, can you guys? How is the echo now? We're just trying to live fix a lot of this stuff while we're doing this. Donald Trump entered the room there in the Capitol Rotunda. It's 11:37 a.m., so we're still awaiting some of the ceremonies to begin. Officially, was set to start right here around 11:30. It looks like the curtain there is parting. And we've got some movement there behind the scenes. I believe that we will have, so that's Hakeem Jeffries and Deb Fisher who are walking now actually into the room.
And Saagar,
yes.
I just want to say one thing I mentioned is Elon Musk is standing with members of the cabinet there. Just so that is there was a point at which when the inauguration was going to be outside, the talk was that he would be sort of relegated to standing by other tech CEOs. But in that picture we just saw him, he's by Brooke Rollins, Doug Burgum. He's standing by actual appointees.
Yeah, that's right. And notice Vivek Ramaswamy, who was standing there as well, which was amusing because the news actually came out this morning from Politico that he'll be exiting Doge if he ever entered for real because of the official excuse, I believe, is that he'll be running for Ohio governor. But obviously there's some behind the scenes stuff that was happening with the fallout from his tweet. So it does appear that one of the first cuts that Doge will make is Vivek Ramaswamy himself. Despite
Saagar,
the fact
have you heard any tea on that?
I've heard quite a few things.
Tell me.
I'm not allowed to. I don't have enough. I can't. I think until it's truly official and he's out, Krystal, then I can share some more of the backstory. But there have been rumblings out of Mar-a-Lago, certainly now for a while, all the way going back to Vivek's infamous tweet. And it was basically set, as I understand it, from the new year onward. They're like, we got to figure out something else. That kind of broke forward as a result of the actual coming to power with Doge and with everything. And they decided, they're like, okay, since Mike DeWine won't give him the Senate, then they're going to make it so that he will run for governor, and that's like a graceful exit. So
which he supposedly wanted to do anyway, I think.
I don't know. I mean, there's no way to know.
Now he'll just do it earlier.
Exactly. All right. It looks like JD Vance is now entering the chamber, and he will be let's see, going to be positioning himself for the oath of office here momentarily. So maybe we can just monitor that, and we can drop in as soon as he does. Go ahead, Emily.
Well, I was gonna say, it looks what they did actually was blend the tech guys with the cabinet, which I think is pretty fascinating. So you're seeing Bezos, you're seeing Musk, you're seeing RFK Jr., but I can't remember Saagar, and maybe I'm just not thinking correctly, but seeing so many CEO/donors next to the political class blended so tightly as though it's one kind of collective organ.
I agree. It is actually genuinely extraordinary here because you can see them mixed both with the cabinet. In some cases, not even mixed with them physically, standing in front of them in some cases. So it's actually an extraordinary image.
I mean, that's Bezos right there behind JD Vance's head.
Right behind JD Vance. You have Sundar Pichai there, to his right. So that is certainly something.
It is something. And, it's something I've been thinking about, too, is the resistance to Trump in 2016 was so much more vociferous and aggressive. And I think that was partially there's just fatigue, and Democrats feel like they tried everything and they don't know what to do, and they're sort of clueless and whatever. But I think part of it, too, is the coalition that he came in with that was more dependent on the quote unquote deplorables, like the Steve Bannons of the world, that was more offensive to Democratic elites then the coalition of like tech oligarchs who have at many times been in their own camp as well. Like the Democratic Party is also quite comfortable with some level of billionaires running the show and endemic oligarchy. So even though I see it as actually much graver danger for the future of the country and the world than the way I actually viewed it in 2016. It makes sense to me that Democratic elites feel like, oh, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, like these were our people at one point too. It'll be fine. This isn't as bad as if it was, Steve Bannon, the deplorables, who were the ones who really had Trump's ear.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, okay, sorry. I'm going to apparently have to step off. Apparently there's something wrong with my microphone. I'll let you guys handle it. I'll be right back in.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and actually dip into a little bit of the live stream here from C-SPAN, since we have Trump coming in right now and J.D. Vance about to take notes.
Amazing moment there of Donald Trump looking to kiss Melania, but the brim of the hat was so wide that he couldn't quite get to the cheek. That was excellent.
Kind of a warm exchange with Biden as well. And it is crazy to see all this just tech robber barons. And then Doug Burgum, who's a tech robber baron in his own right, coming from Microsoft. RFK Jr. there off to the side as well. Kind of extraordinary to see him in the mix.
Look at John Ratcliffe all the way in the back with Lee Zeldin. These are cabinet guys, and they're behind Sundar Pichai and Jeff Bezos, who just are getting on the bandwagon as of 2 months ago.
Yeah. And probably I'd say Mark Zuckerberg is the one who's made this sort of most shameless about face, even going so far as to not only nuke their, DEI and content moderation, whatever, but to move the content moderation team to Texas.
Oh, and look at that.
Really quite something.
What we just saw is that Glenn Youngkin and many other Republican officials are actually watching from the visitor center. So they're not even in the rotunda. That is the Capitol Visitor Center.
Wow. That is extraordinary. It's only a few hundred people who can fit in this room. So if you're one of the people who got the ticket to be right up there with Donald Trump, those were highly coveted spots. And, many of those tech barons, they literally paid dearly in order to secure those spaces. And I do think, Emily, you're right to pick up on the symbolism of having them even more prominent than, cabinet officials going through official Senate confirmation processes, et cetera, because it truly is acknowledgement of who has the real power.
Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, the Honorable Amy Klobuchar.
Amy is enjoying the snow and cold.
She wanted to be outside so she could make her famous snow joke.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 60th presidential inauguration. Today, President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Vance will take their oaths of office, and we will witness the peaceful transfer of power at the heart of our democracy. For the past year, I've chaired the inaugural ceremony committee, which includes the leadership of Congress from both parties. We thank the committee and Capitol staff and law enforcement who worked so hard over the last year, and especially the last 3 days. You've done a beautiful job, and you have shown grace under pressure.
Kimberly Guilfoyle, not seated by Don Jr.
This year is our enduring democracy. The presence of so many presidents and vice presidents here today is truly a testament to that endurance. We welcome President Biden and Dr. Biden. We welcome Vice President Harris and Doug Emhoff, President Obama, President Clinton and Secretary Clinton, President Bush and Laura Bush, Vice President Pence, Vice President Quayle and Marilyn Quayle. The justices of the United States Supreme Court are with us, all 9 of them, I counted, and of course, the Trump and Vance families. This ceremony marks what will soon be 250 years of our democracy. It is the moment when leaders elevated by the will of the people promise to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, the guardians of our country. Through war and peace, through adversity and prosperity, we hold this inauguration every 4 years. And today it falls on Martin Luther King Day, a further reminder that we must strive to uphold the values enshrined in our Constitution, the freedoms, the liberties, and, as is inscribed on the entrance of the United States Supreme Court, equal justice under law.
All right, I think we could come out of this a little bit. Sorry to the Klobuchar heads out there. But I just was looking on Twitter, and we got a little bit of news. So with minutes left in his presidency, Biden issues a full and unconditional pardon of his family, most notably his brother, James Biden. We also have a commutation of the sentence of Native American political prisoner Leonard Peltier, but no pardon. But that was one that activists were really looking towards. So you add that in, and then you've got the January 6th committee, Liz Cheney, Fauci, Mark Milley, that he did as well. And, I think that this is a reflection of we're in this new era of just like brazen lack of accountability for elites. I mean, the man who's about to take the oath of office, whatever you think of him, he was convicted of crimes. He had many others that he was going to, potentially face justice for were he not elected. So you've got that. You've got Elon Musk buying the government, and now whatever regulatory issues he's having, those will certainly be, swept under the rug. Those will no longer be an issue for him. You've got, I personally think the meme coin stuff is just brazen theft and should be completely illegal, but of course it's not. And so, again, when he came in 2016, there was this real ethos of, oh, he's going to be an anti-corruption crusader. He's going to drain the swamp, etc. That didn't happen. And now there's a full embrace of the swamp, which is sitting at the dais with him. And then, the Democrats are like, well, why should we hold to any sort of rules or standards of accountability ourselves that no one else seems to care about anymore?
Yeah, I think I could see how you got there, Krystal. I think that by the way, is my audio okay? Are you guys hearing me now? Is this better? All right, fine. Finally, I apologize. I really do apologize to everybody. It's not as easy as it looks. But I think really what it does is, I think your point about the lack of accountability in general here for our democratic elites is an important one. And you also see an embrace of the imperial presidency by both. So for example, you had Joe Biden near the end when the TikTok ban looked like it was going to come into effect. It's like, oh, I'm not going to enforce it. And it's like, well, that's not really how the law works, right? And so you even have Donald Trump now. Right, but that's my point. Is what's the point of having a law if you can just issue an executive order that's like, I'm not going to comply with the law? And even with TikTok, we're probably going to spend a lot of time on that this week. The machinations of this are crazy because for these companies to believe Donald Trump and Joe Biden by turning back on their service, they are risking ruinous fines that could put them out of business. And an actual scrutiny, if Tom Cotton or any other group actually were to bring this to court, could seriously put them in legal jeopardy. So that is a big thing. Look, James Biden, not one of the more well-known folks, but I think real BP heads will know if they've been watching the show. Biden's brother, James, is Hunter's business partner in a lot of his corrupt dealings, and is more of a secondary character to a lot of this saga. But he certainly, was in a lot of jeopardy himself. It does just show you, it shows us, I think, what the Biden family saw this as existential. I think to them, they don't really want any more scrutiny of them. For Dr. Fauci, for Mark Milley, I will say this on the Fauci front. Now he doesn't need to plead the fifth or worry about legal jeopardy. And so let's have him before Congress. Tell us everything about the lab leak. I don't want congressional Republicans or really anybody, the select committee or others, to drop this investigation, because arguably he's in the best position now to be able to at least tell us some of the truth, right, on his way out. Although I believe Glenn Greenwald did cite a legal standard. There is, I forget exactly what it's called, but by the acceptance of a pardon is like an implicit admission of wrongdoing and or potential guilt, which is
really?
interesting. Yeah, you apparently can reject a pardon. I did not know that. You are not legally obligated to accept a pardon from the president, and implicit within that is this standard. I can pull it up actually. While we're all talking. Go ahead, Emily.
Saagar, I just want to put in a word about James Biden while we're talking about him, because he's actually in a similar situation to Anthony Fauci, which is that as the incoming Trump administration was pledging retribution, Rand Paul, many people remember, referred Fauci to Merrick Garland, who obviously wasn't going to pursue charges against him, but basically on a charge of lying to Congress. This is what James Biden was in, what had been recommended also to the Justice Department by James Comer, Republican, obviously James Comer, very MAGA-friendly James Comer. James Biden said in front of Congress that Joe Biden, his brother Joe Biden, did not meet with any of their Chinese business partners while they were pursuing deals with them. And that turned out to be categorically untrue. And Anthony Fauci, obviously, Rand Paul says, lied to Congress when he said they were not doing gain of function research funded by the NIH at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We now know that that is not true. So those are two statements of lying in front of Congress. Now, if we want to start playing this Banana Republic doom spiral game of referring everybody who says something that maybe I think Fauci was lying. I think James Biden was
100%.
lying. You get into, we can indict ham sandwich territory, obviously, if we're going to start chasing partisans for lying in front of Congress. But James Biden flat out lied about that relationship. There's no
I do have
he would have been in legal jeopardy.
I do have the court case here in front of me that Glenn cited. It's a Burdick versus United States 236. It says there are substantial differences between legislative immunity and a pardon. The latter carries an imputation of guilt and an acceptance of a confession in it, while the former is noncommittal and tantamount to silence of the witness. That is apparently Supreme Court dicta. So was not aware of that. Thank you very much to Glenn. Every once in a while he reminds us that he is a lawyer. Looks like the benediction is happening there
Cardinal
at
Dolan.
the Capitol. That's right, Cardinal Dolan giving that. But yeah, I think it's look, we're about 6 minutes away from Donald J. Trump officially becoming the 47th president of the United States, and I just can't get over kind of looking at the scene and kind of the general vibe here in the Capitol and what it's been like downtown. It is crazy also to just see the makeup of a lot of the Trump coalition. There's a lot of, there's a lot of Hispanic families in town, a lot of Indian families, Asian families, very different, I could say, from 2017. I covered that inauguration. I was on the ground for it, I was outside of the Trump rally a little bit yesterday and in the area downtown. We've already mentioned the Trump, some of the big tech embrace and some of the other folks, the new media, but, a lot of new voters and Trump fans themselves who are here in Washington, a lot of young guys, definitely noticed that, but really multiracial from what I could tell. It's interesting. It's interesting to consider that he comes into office here, very different circumstance. And actually, I saw an interesting take out there, which I haven't been able to get out of my mind, which is that, actually, I think it was Michelle Goldberg over at the New York Times, who was like, if we're being honest, it's worse that he was out of office and then came back because he's in a stronger position. We would have been better off it being reelected in 2020. And I was like, considering both how much of the coalition has changed, the Democratic coalition, but I think more importantly, the theory of victory and the theory of governance that is solidified now in the Trump movement, the level of seriousness over the last 4 years from not just Doge, we're talking about Schedule F, 4 years of Stephen Miller and others ruminating on what went wrong and what didn't, has made them probably 10 times more prepared to assume governance today than they were the last time around. And obviously, considering how much of a complete, just chaos it was, even in 2020 and those dynamics and all of that, I think there is some wisdom to it. If we think just about the position of strength, both culturally, that is Donald Trump's back. Go ahead.
This is Franklin Graham. He's Billy Graham's son. He just.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. So big evangelical leader. Thank you, Emily, being the resident evangelical expert for us.
She's got the Catholic and the evangelical lane covered.
I would not have recognized
the raptured.
What do they call them? The Reverend Doctor? I've never understood what that means. The Reverend Doctor Franklin Graham. That's right. He's speaking right now. It's, I don't know. I can't really keep that one out of my head. It just feels so fundamentally different. The overall embrace. And
well, and Saagar,
yeah,
not only that, so they had 4 years that they spent planning. I mean, I know they wanted to disown Project 2025, but it was a real thing, and it is the blueprint, the blueprint, or at least partially the blueprint. There was a lot of thought that went into, okay, what theoretical legal loopholes could we use to exploit to do what we want without having to worry about Congress, without having to worry about the Senate. Yep. Obviously, the conservative Supreme Court was secured during the first Trump term. But now you have the Supreme Court having weighed in and said, listen, whatever you do, if it's remotely connected to your office, you can't be charged for it. You can get away with whatever you want. So any breaks that were on the Trump train the first time around, they don't exist. Right. There aren't going to be Mark Millies in there who were like, you can't shoot protesters in the legs, right? Those people aren't going to be around this time. There aren't going to be, John McCain doing the thumbs down on the attempt to repeal Obamacare. Those Republicans have, by and large, been drummed down to the party. Like that, right. Whatever resistance there was within the Republican caucus themselves, that doesn't exist anymore. Obviously, like I said, the courts are, by and large on Trump's side. So, and he doesn't have to run for re-election anymore. So he feels perfectly free. And this is what I said when you were coming in and out with regard to the meme coin. Like, that is just it's hard for me to even care anymore about like James Biden's small ball corruption or Hunter Biden's small ball corruption with when Trump is stealing tens of billions of dollars from his own supporters, just hoping they'll be suckers enough to hang in there long enough for him to do a Hawk Tuah spot style pump and dump. So it is totally, it is totally carte blanche. It's totally no brakes on the car. And with a very different coalition and base of support in place this time versus last time. And so, it is, it's going to be extraordinary to watch these next 4 years.
Yeah,
and see
we already have that.
See some of the, weird alliances, some of the things that I find very, frightening in terms of the future of the country and democracy and all of those things with this band of oligarchs who are being seated at the dais and proudly on display. Michael Tracy on Twitter pointing out that Miriam Adelson has a more prominent position there than many cabinet members. Like that's what this iteration looks like.
Yeah, and that's the tension. So I can't give away too much, but I did get to at least see some of Steve Bannon, and it was very interesting to hear a lot of. It's very counter signaling to a lot of the forces that you're talking about there.
Here's JD's
Krystal.
Family coming in.
There's JD's. Looks like JD's kids who are coming in here for the swearing in. Usha Vance, I think,
in the pink
assembling
coat there.
them.
Yeah,
she's looking good. I gotta say, she looks good.
It's a great coat.
By the way, It is 12 p.m. East Coast, so 1 minute left of the Joe Biden presidency. All right, exactly 1 minute. We're at less than 60 seconds here till Donald J. Trump constitutionally becomes president of the United States. Why don't we dip into this, guys, and we'll listen to JD take the oath of office.
We swear.
I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith.
That I will bear true faith.
And allegiance to the same.
And allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation.
Without any mental reservation.
Or purpose of evasion.
Or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office.
The duties of the office.
On which I am about to enter.
On which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Vice President.
The bros are on top right now. That's for sure. If you're a fellow traveler, conservative movement type of person watching Brett Kavanaugh swear in JD Vance, someone had told you that when Kavanaugh was going through that confirmation battle, you would have felt enormously optimistic about the future.
I mean, I'll tell you this, on a personal level, this is genuinely wild to see. I mean, I met JD Vance many years ago, whenever he was just a whenever he was just a humble author. I've got a couple. I've got the book behind me, Hillbilly Elegy. I actually think you might have signed that one for me back in 2016. And so, you know, to watch him become now the vice president of the United States officially, knew it was coming, is just on a personal level.
Raise your right hand and
for me to watch.
repeat
Okay,
after me.
we're going to dip into this. President
Donald
Trump
John
now taking
Trump,
the
do
oath.
solemnly swear
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
We do not see Jared Kushner among
How do you-
the
He's
members
seated
here.
there. Oh, so there we go. The
he's seated,
21.
okay.
That's
Gun
the 21 gun salute. The cannons, the classic part of the inaugural ceremony.
All right,
here
Mac,
that
you
we're
can
going.
you can
Yeah,
dial
you can
this
turn
down. You can dial this
while
down so we can react.
That's right. You go ahead.
Saagar, I wanted to get your. I know you primarily. Matt, can we turn this down? Hello.
It's off.
Yeah, it's off. We're not hearing it.
It is.
Or at
Oh,
least
I'm
not
hearing it over and over again.
Oh, that's strange.
Oh,
All right,
okay.
well,
There we go.
Yeah.
So Saagar, I know you primarily focus on men's fashion, but I'm curious your view of the choice of Melania with that hat, which is quite striking and in an indoor setting.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I think you might have missed the awkward attempted kiss moment between
I
Trump
did.
and
No, I saw it. Yeah.
Did you see it?
I did see it. Personally, just going to say it. I don't like the hat.
It looks
I
very
mean,
severe,
I'm
right?
fine with the hat. I think it looks nice, but indoors it's a bit odd just because we can't really see her face. I think Ivanka's hat is a little bit more tasteful because you can actually still see that while it still is like complementing the overall aesthetic. I do believe, are we going to be taking the inaugural address now? I think that will be happening here momentarily while Trump is standing there aside and he is waiting.
I will say
go ahead,
that's
Emily.
very, very vintage Melania, that she wants to have something that's is not conventional and a little bit mysterious, that people are like, it's
reading the
avant-garde
meaning
and-
into.
Right, yeah, she loves that.
Right.
She loves that.
Right. That's that is funny. Personally,
And
more of a fan of the
protects
Usha
her from
Vance
her
outfit.
husband's. I like Usha's coat. I agree with you on that.
I think
Saagar.
she's looked great all weekend. I'll say it. Oscar de la Renta. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a friend who was a buyer at a big brand for a long time, and she's been texting all weekend. Like she's kind of in new MAGA, like wouldn't have voted for him in 2016, but so she's been shrieking at the fashion choices. They have just been fabulous.
Oh yeah, I liked whenever Melania wore the like cape. It was like a black coat.
Yes,
I love
know what you're talking
formal
about. That looks
female
nice.
dress coats can
Yeah.
be so elegant in my opinion, and she had that black coat with the like cape shoulder, and that looked really good. But yeah, the hat, it looks very severe. Griffin says that she looks like it's like a Wicked costume.
While we're on the subject, it was an interesting barometer of the cultural vibe back in 2016, 2017. I think Dolce & Gabbana was like the only people that would openly be dressing Melania.
Oh,
if I'm remembering
That's
correctly.
right. That's
But
right.
Oscar de la Renta has been posting publicly, like posting it to X, their outfits for Melania and Ivanka over the course of the weekend. So it's like very much the insight into the upper echelons of cultural gatekeeping. They're open about it now.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the vibe shift too. It
They
certainly
want
is.
the affiliation openly.
I will
It's
say,
sort of marketing.
Yeah, I just think so much of this, if you just think about all these things, like if we think about the demoralization right now, I think a lot of the Democratic Party, because their theory of politics for the last 8 years just fundamentally failed. You have Donald Trump now, who's the not only elected president of the United States again, but he won the popular vote. You have a broad cultural acceptance, I think this time very differently to Donald Trump and his reception with the coalition. So many of the narratives, the theories, and all of that were just fundamentally incorrect. On top of that, like you said, Emily, there's it's not extraordinary in the same way that it was in 2016. And I just can't keep getting away from that because there's a great question in politics. Like, what year is it? Like, what time is it? And there's a big question here. Is this 1984 or is it 1992? And what I mean by that is in 1984, no, not talking about the book, 1984, Ronald Reagan's second inaugural, also the very last inaugural to be held here in the Capitol Rotunda because of cold weather. In 1984, Ronald Reagan, wins this massive popular vote victory, electoral college blowout. He not only ushers in his own second term, but he ushers in 8 more years of Republican rule, which is crazy because he hands it to his predecessor, his vice president, George H.W. Bush, and you kind of have a cultural consensus at that time. The new left is over. Reaganism is like here to stay, and people have to really figure it out. And increasingly, I do think that that's the case. But of course, we can't, look away from 1992 either. George H.W. Bush took the oath in 1988 with a very, very popular mandate, with his electoral college victory. He had a 91% approval rating at one point in the midst of his presidency, in the height of the imperial, United States in the Cold War moment as it's all falling. And then, of course, falls to Bill Clinton in the 92 election. There's a lot of reasons for that. But I think the point here is just about the next 4 years just feel so fundamentally up for grabs in a very important way.
I think
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think there's basically 3 possibilities. One is because in your telling, you say, okay, we have to grapple with George H.W. Bush leads into Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton solidifies the Reagan era. He's the one who really creates the bipartisan neoliberal consensus, where it's basically we're going to do our own version of Reaganism. And that has has reigned supreme up until effectively 2016, when you've got the Bernie Sanders movement on the left challenging that orthodoxy and the Donald Trump movement on the right challenging that orthodoxy. So the question now is, do Democrats effectively sort of solidify Trumpism in the same way that Bill Clinton solidified Reaganism? I think that's probably the most likely outcome here. That doesn't mean that Republicans are going to win forever. It means that the Trumpism paradigm and worldview, which is itself up for grabs. We can talk about that a little bit more in a minute with the oligarchy and the tech overlords and how they have a different view than the Bannon people, et cetera. But I think that's likely the direction. Another direction would be, and I think this is probably the least likely, but the one I'm obviously cheering for, that you have a left populist movement that is its own break for neoliberalism that can compete, in the model of a Lula da Silva or a Claudia Sheinbaum, that sort of direction. Or you have Democrats still trying to hold on to the good old days of neoliberalism and continuing to get more and more destroyed and becoming a smaller and smaller minority coalition. To me, those are the 3 possible paths.
Krystal, Trump is taking the dais now for his inaugural address. Let's tune in. We'll give everybody a reaction immediately afterwards. Let's go ahead and bring it up.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Well, thank you very, very much. Vice President Vance, Speaker Johnson, Senator Thune, Chief Justice Roberts, Justices of the United States Supreme Court, President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and my fellow citizens. The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our safety will be restored. The scales of justice will be rebalanced. The vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end. And our top priority will be to create a nation that is proud prosperous, and free. America will soon be greater, stronger, and far more exceptional than ever before. I return to the presidency confident and optimistic that we are at the start of a thrilling new era of national success. A tide of change is sweeping the country, sunlight is pouring over the entire world, and America has the chance to seize this opportunity like never before. But first, we must be honest about the challenges we face. While they are plentiful, they will be annihilated by this great momentum that the world is now witnessing in the United States of America. As we gather today, our government confronts a crisis of trust. For many years, a radical and corrupt establishment has extracted power and wealth from our citizens while the pillars of our society lay broken and seemingly in complete disrepair. We now have a government that cannot manage even a simple crisis at home, while at the same time stumbling into a continuing catalog of catastrophic events abroad. It fails to protect our magnificent, law-abiding American citizens, but provides sanctuary and protection for dangerous criminals, many from prisons and mental institutions that have illegally entered our country from all over the world. We have a government that has given unlimited funding to the defense of foreign borders, but refuses to defend American borders or, more importantly, its own people. Our country can no longer deliver basic services in times of emergency, as recently shown by the wonderful people of North Carolina, been treated so badly. And other states who are still suffering from a hurricane that took place many months ago. Or more recently, Los Angeles, where we're watching fires still tragically burn from weeks ago without even a token of defense. They're raging through the houses and communities, even affecting some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in our country, some of whom are sitting here right now. They don't have a home any longer. That's interesting. But we can't let this happen. Everyone is unable to do anything about it. That's going to change. We have a public health system that does not deliver in times of disaster, yet more money is spent on it than any country anywhere in the world. And we have an education system that teaches our children to be ashamed of themselves in many cases, to hate our country despite the love that we try so desperately to provide to them. All of this will change starting today, and it will change very quickly. My recent election is a mandate to completely and totally reverse a horrible betrayal and all of these many betrayals that have taken place, and to give the people back their faith, their wealth, their democracy, and indeed their freedom. From this moment on, America's decline is over. Our liberties and our nation's glorious destiny will no longer be denied, and we will immediately restore the integrity, competency, and loyalty of America's government. Over the past 8 years, I have been tested and challenged more than any president in our 250-year history, and I've learned a lot along the way. The journey to reclaim our republic has not been an easy one, that I can tell you. Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again. Thank you. Thank you very much. That is why each day under our administration of American patriots, we will be working to meet every crisis with dignity and power and strength. We will move with purpose and speed to bring back hope, prosperity, safety, and peace for citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. For American citizens, January 20th, 2025 is Liberation Day. It is my hope that our recent presidential election will be remembered as the greatest and most consequential election in the history of our country. As our victory showed, the entire nation is rapidly unifying behind our agenda with dramatic increases in support from virtually every element of our society, young and old, men and women, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, urban, suburban, rural, and very importantly, we had a powerful win in all 7 swing states, and the popular vote, we won by millions of people. To the Black and Hispanic communities, I want to thank you for the tremendous outpouring of love and trust that you have shown me with your vote. We set records, and I will not forget it. I've heard your voices in the campaign, and I look forward to working with you in the years to come. Today is Martin Luther King Day, and his honor, this will be a great honor, but in his honor, we will strive together to make his dream a reality. We will make his dream come true. Thank you. Thank you. National unity is now returning to America, and confidence and pride is soaring like never before. In everything we do, my administration will be inspired by a strong pursuit of excellence and unrelenting success. We will not forget our country. We will not forget our Constitution, and we will not forget our God. Can't do that. Today, I will sign a series of historic executive orders. With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense. First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. All illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy. I will end the practice of catch and release. And I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country. Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. and by invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks, bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities. As Commander-in-Chief, I have no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions, and that is exactly what I am going to do. We will do it at a level that nobody's ever seen before. Next, I will direct all members of my cabinet to marshal the vast powers at their disposal to defeat what was record inflation and rapidly bring down costs and prices. The inflation crisis was caused by massive overspending and escalating energy prices, and that is why today I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill. America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again, right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it. With my actions today, we will end the Green New Deal and we will revoke the electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto industry and keeping my sacred pledge to our great American auto workers. In other words, you'll be able to buy the car of your choice. We will build automobiles in America again at a rate that nobody could have dreamt possible just a few years ago. And thank you to the auto workers of our nation for your inspiring vote of confidence. We did tremendously with their vote. I will immediately begin the overhaul of our trade system to protect American workers and families. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. For this purpose, we are establishing the External Revenue Service to collect all tariffs, duties, and revenues. It will be massive amounts of money pouring into our treasury, coming from foreign sources. The American dream will soon be back and thriving like never before to restore competence and effectiveness to our federal government. My administration will establish the brand new Department of Government Efficiency. After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents. Something I know something about. We will not allow that to happen. It will not happen again. Under my leadership, we will restore fair, equal, and impartial justice under the constitutional rule of law. And we are going to bring law and order back to our cities. This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. This week, I will reinstate any service members who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay. And I will sign an order to stop our warriors from being subjected to radical political theories and social experiments while on duty. It's going to end immediately. Our armed forces will be freed to focus on their sole mission, defeating America's enemies. Like in 2017, we will again build the strongest military the world has ever seen. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier. I'm pleased to say that as of yesterday, one day before I assumed office, the hostages in the Middle East are coming back home to their families. Thank you. America will reclaim its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, most respected nation on earth, inspiring the awe and admiration of the entire world. A short time from now, we are going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and we will restore the name of a great president, William McKinley, to Mount McKinley, where it should be and where it belongs. President McKinley made our country very rich through tariffs and through talent. He was a natural businessman and gave Teddy Roosevelt the money for many of the great things he did, including the Panama Canal, which has foolishly been given to the country of Panama after the United States. The United States, I mean, think of this, spent more money than ever spent on a project before and lost 38,000 lives in the building of the Panama Canal. We have been treated very badly from this foolish gift that should have never been made, and Panama's promise to us has been broken. The purpose of our deal and the spirit of our treaty has been totally violated. American ships are being severely overcharged and not treated fairly in any way, shape, or form, and that includes the United States Navy. And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back. Above all, my message to Americans today is that it is time for us to once again act with courage, vigor, and the vitality of history's greatest civilization. So as we liberate our nation, we will lead it to new heights of victory and success. We will not be deterred. Together, we will end the chronic disease epidemic and keep our children safe, healthy, and disease-free. The United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. Ambition is the lifeblood of a great nation. And right now, our nation is more ambitious than any other. There's no nation like our nation. Americans are explorers, builders, innovators, entrepreneurs, and pioneers. The spirit of the frontier is written into our hearts. The call of the next great adventure resounds from within our souls. Our American ancestors turned a small group of colonies on the edge of a vast continent into a mighty republic of the most extraordinary citizens on earth. No one comes close. Americans pushed thousands of miles through a rugged land of untamed wilderness. They crossed deserts, scaled mountains, braved untold dangers, won the Wild West, ended slavery, rescued millions from tyranny, lifted billions from poverty, harnessed electricity, split the atom, launched mankind into the heavens, and put the universe of human knowledge into the palm of the human hand. If we work together, there is nothing we cannot do and no dream we cannot achieve. Many people thought it was impossible for me to stage such a historic political comeback. But as you see today, here I am. The American people have spoken. I stand before you now as proof that you should never believe that something is impossible to do. In America, the impossible is what we do best. From New York to Los Angeles, from Philadelphia to Phoenix, from Chicago to Miami, from Houston to right here in Washington, D.C., our country was forged and built by the generations of patriots who gave everything they had for our rights and for our freedom. They were farmers and soldiers, cowboys and factory workers, steel workers and coal miners, police officers and pioneers who pushed onward, marched forward, and let no obstacle defeat their spirit or their pride. Together they laid down the railroads, raised up the skyscrapers, built great highways, won 2 world wars, defeated fascism and communism, and triumphed over every single challenge that they faced. After all we have been through together, we stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history. With your help, we will restore America promise, and we will rebuild the nation that we love, and we love it so much. We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. So to every parent who dreams for their child, and every child who dreams for their future, I am with you, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We're going to win like never before. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. In recent years, our nation has suffered greatly, but we are going to bring it back and make it great again, greater than ever before. We will be a nation like no other, full of compassion, courage, and exceptionalism. Our power will stop all wars and bring a new spirit of unity to a world that has been angry, violent, and totally unpredictable. America will be respected again and admired again, including by people of religion, faith, and goodwill. We will be prosperous. We will be proud. We will be strong, and we will win like never before. We will not be conquered. We will not be intimidated. We will not be broken, and we will not fail. From this day on, the United States of America will be a free, sovereign, and independent nation. We will stand bravely. We will live proudly. We will dream boldly, and nothing will stand in our way because we are Americans. The future is ours, and our golden age has just begun. Thank you. God bless America. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, you've just been listening to the once and future president, Donald Trump, once again, assuming office. That's right, the once and current president. Saagar, let me turn to you for your initial response. And, you know, we've been sort of underscoring some of the contrast between this Trump presidency versus the first Trump presidency. And to me, a lot of those were evident in the, you know, the tone and the approach to this speech versus the 2016 American Carnage speech.
This was really a blend, I thought, of the 2 speeches, and it reflects the victory that Trump has now won, as opposed to the underdog kind of surprise status that he had the first time. American Carnage and the themes of that speech were present, I would say, in about the first 10 to 12 minutes, where it was really a searing indictment of the Biden presidency, from foreign chaos to inflation to an overall indictment of like cultural liberalism and the left. So the way that the speech was structured was really interesting. It began, you know, both with the golden age of America starts right now. If we think about it almost like a college paper, the second paragraph then was one which laid out his theory of what went wrong in America, from immigration, chaos at the southern border, inflation, cultural liberalism, and then it came to his solutions. What was interesting, actually, was to hear many of the concrete proposals. That was the big thing. That's very different from the first time around, the specific executive orders. This was also tonally, you know, this is State of the Union Trump. This is his most disciplined. He only went off script 1 or 2 times. There was a weaving in of some of the most famous moments in American history, from the call to put a man on the moon by John F. Kennedy to we will plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. He's talked specifically, I have here, in my notes about many of the things that he ticked off from Foreign Chaos. But actually, what's really interesting to me about the speech was this was only about 36 some minutes, I think, here as an inaugural address, relatively average in the number of time, but spent significantly less time on foreign affairs than I thought. And that is interesting to me because it is clear from what I could see with Trump's speech that this was all about politics here at home. So if we think about some of the previous big speeches by American presidents, the inaugural address is very often, famously in 2009, Barack Obama extends his fist into a hand to the country of Iran, which led to the Iran deal. President Reagan spent huge portions of his speech speaking about the Soviet Union, about communism. Similarly to George W. Bush, a lot of people will not remember, George H.W. Bush. Many people may not remember, but Bill Clinton spent a significant amount of time kind of thinking about the post-Cold War era. This was a speech about America and its problems. And to the extent that the foreign affairs were weaved into it, it was about our spirit of national unity, and I will win to achieve the peacemaker unifier status. So I was really interested to see that tonally and just how strikingly different that is than a lot of inaugural addresses that are often given. But yeah, overall, I would say it was a blend of the original 2016 American Carnage. We had your wealth has been taken from you, an indictment of the bipartisan elite of the Biden presidency, but then bringing it all really to a source of cohesive unity in America, and that from that will flow prosperity both at home and abroad. So interesting for me to watch it. Actually, I thought he did a pretty good job. Both he stuck to his overall text, which is difficult for him. Tonally hit some of the most popular parts of his campaign promises, and also that have been polling, as we've seen in some recent stuff. I'm sure we'll discuss in our shows going forward. So, overall, this is a speech that very much fits in the spirit of American Carnage, but represents him coming into his second term. I will note, there was not calls for unity, quote unquote, in terms of working with the Democrats. This was a defiant Trump, a popularly elected Trump that I thought was interesting also to see from him, very much in terms of the lessons that he's taken over the last 4 years, linking his own persecution and his legal indictments from the Biden administration to how he was able to overcome that in the spirit of the American people, kind of fusing those two things. So very interesting speech, I thought overall, and I think it's quite effective in terms of him delivering his message.
Emily, what were your thoughts?
Well, I think what we're seeing a lot of his advisors or his operatives tweet in unison is golden age, golden age. Whoever wrote that speech was talking about sunshine pouring all over the world. And I think there was a really intentional effort to blend, as Saagar says, American carnage and optimism in a way that the original Make America Great Again never, like that original catchphrase was not always forward looking in terms of the tone that Trump leveraged it in. Reagan is very, very different than that. Reagan was much more forward looking whenever he talked about making America great again, which he literally used the same line that was from Reagan. And I think what Trump did was move a little bit more in that direction and try to use the aesthetic, conjure the aesthetic of sunniness, golden, sunny. We're hearing this over and over again. I think that's what they wanted to be the number one takeaway from the speech, was the tone of like literally sunshine and gold.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I actually didn't think that it bore much of any resemblance to American Carnage speech, because that one really went deep on not only painting a dark portrait of America, which, many Americans agree with, and I also agree with, painting that picture in a way that was an indictment of both party establishments. This is a much more partisan speech. But in addition, the line in the speech that actually stood out the most to me as such a encapsulation of the difference between that speech and that moment and this moment is when he was talking about the LA fires, and he says many rich and powerful people's homes burned down. And many of those rich and powerful people are with me here right now. So different from the theme of American Carnage was I'm for the forgotten man and the forgotten women. And now the optics are, I have all of my billionaire buddies here with me, ready to run the government. If I could just, I'm just going to read a portion so people can recall the American Carnage speech and what the tone was. And to me, how different it was from this. Almost felt like, to your point, Saagar, like a State of the Union. It was like a laundry list of we're going to do this and that, and executive orders, blah blah blah. But he said in that speech, which really painted the vision, the sort of ideological orientation of Trumpism, at least as the way it was sold to the public. We can talk about the differences between how it was sold and what it really was, but in any way, it was more of a sort of like, let me lay out my vision, my view of the world. Whereas this was more of sort of like a laundry list of policy. But in that original speech, he said, for too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government while the people have borne the cost. Washington flourished, but the people did not share in its wealth. Politicians prospered, but the jobs left and the factories closed. The establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country. Their victories have not been your victories. Their triumphs have not been your triumphs. The people who are sitting with him there on the dais in front of the cabinet members, the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezos and the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, they're the people that he was indicting in that original American Carnage speech. And now they are giving him $1 million or more for his inauguration. They're his best buddies. They're hanging out at Mar-a-Lago, etc. So to me, that was what was most noteworthy about that speech. And actually, Li Feng, let me see if I can share this.
I have it up, Krystal.
You have it up. Yeah, Li Feng, he had tweeted, over the next decade, Silicon Valley will replace blue and white collar workers with AI and outsource more jobs overseas. So the people that are standing around Trump, they're on a mission to do that. Truckers, designers, engineers, lawyers, and far more. Power will flow to the dozen tech overlords standing next to Trump at his inauguration. Ominous optics. And, you know, for me, that's sort of the biggest takeaway from this entire dynamic. And Lee made another great point, which was, you know, at Trump's rallies, he really went out of his way to have regular working people. I remember him going to McDonald's and driving the garbage truck, et cetera, et cetera. And now, and I think it was Stoller who said this, those people are literally out in the cold while the tech oligarchs are there warmly snug in the embrace of the Capitol, standing there behind Donald Trump.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, look, Krystal, what you're describing is the fundamental tension of the overall Trump movement, which is one both that is backed by an establishment consensus, most of it really freaked out by the popular vote victory mandate that Donald Trump was then delivered on the backs of working people of the United States. If we think about the working class coalition that delivered the popular vote here to Donald Trump, the swing state victory, all seven, exactly right. Those are the people. And I see all of those people walking about the city, as you said, bundled up. Some of them not bundled up too much. You guys didn't listen, but it's okay.
Fetterman's in shorts.
That's a whole other thing, which we won't even get into.
By the way, in shorts for the inauguration of our president, wore a suit for Bibi Netanyahu's visit. Hashtag just saying.
Oh, wow. Great call out, Krystal. I love that. That is fantastic. Okay, I'm banking that one up there. I'm going to steal that one from you. Just a little bit more on the speech. Dynamics wise too, I have to say, we should never have these in the Capitol again. I hate the applause lines in terms of pausing, just like a State of the Union.
Yeah.
Inaugural addresses, but delivered outside with the magisterial view of the Capitol, are those, like you said, Krystal, which focus on the masses and the hundreds of thousands of people. All of the inaugural tickets, some 200,000, were given away, right? So the expected crowd was hundreds of thousands of people to attend this inauguration because it is the people's president. When you keep it inside, just generally, I don't think it's great optics specifically for what you're saying. I do think it's a very important call out, the one that you just made, but I also think that this is a natural extension of Donald Trump becoming the Republican Party, right? Because when you are the leader of the Republican Party, you can't indict the Republican Party. So if I'm looking through all of my notes, we just see Trump's conquering of the Republican Party, and hence why it was much more, quote unquote, partisan speech. So he began, his first priority was immigration. Today, I will declare a national emergency at the southern border. Flowed from that was drill, baby, drill, inflation, and energy prices. crisis. What came after that was about Doge, then bringing back free speech to America, then DEI, ending those policies, then eventually transitioning to the military, and of course, some classic Trump giveaways. We're taking back the Panama Canal. We are changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
Well, I think that part is actually worth dwelling on a little bit, because we've talked about this a little bit on the show. And I do think Russia invading Ukraine and getting away with it, but even more so, Israel committing a genocide in Gaza and getting away with it. This has really solidified a new era in foreign policy that Trump is seizing on. And so he is, in this speech, really overtly announcing a new American imperialism. I mean, he even uses the term manifest destiny.
Yeah.
Goes on and on about seizing the Panama Canal, right? Talks about renaming various things. And, it really is quite assertive. And also, I would add into that, as part of the immigration portion, he says he wants to declare the cartels foreign terrorist organizations. That'll be one of the original executive orders. That means that he can go to war with Mexico with zero congressional input, using the authorization for the use of military force that was put in place for the war on terror post 9/11.
Yes,
so
that's right.
Again, another quite imperialist, militaristic direction that he feels, that he is obviously unafraid of embracing and putting out there as part of his project for this term and this administration. And one more thing before I get you guys both to weigh in on that. Saagar, you mentioned how little there was on foreign, Ukraine. I don't think you mentioned Ukraine at all.
No, we did not say the word Ukraine.
There's just sort of an allusion to the wars that wouldn't have happened if I had been there. There was one mention of the Gaza, at least temporary ceasefire deal that's in effect right now, which was all, we're happy the hostages are coming home. And that was it. So nothing broader about the end of the war, the end of the suffering of none of it, just a one-liner about the hostages. And that was all. So that was noteworthy to me as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, it's interesting. So this is where the vagueness of Trump, he often weighs for himself, right? So what he does is by just saying I'm the peacemaker, then the conditions of peace itself, it's like, okay, well, we'll figure it out in time. Same with
and partially because
hostage.
he's not a hardened ideologue that's
Exactly.
and sometimes he is, right? Like on trade, he is a hardened ideologue, but there's some things where it's like, oh, the Panama Canal? Oh, I remember the Jimmy Carter thing. Yeah, let's get that shit back.
I do want to stick on this because it's actually important, because at a big level, let's zoom out. I've got a bunch of these books behind me. And when we think about, when there's the Trump book is here and there's multiple other presidents and we're looking past, 30, 40 years behind us, what we will see is a collapse effectively of much of the liberal world order under the Biden administration, both from Israel and from Ukraine. Afghanistan was also a significant part of that. We are now fully back in the era of great power competition. And so that's why invoking President McKinley and the Theodore Roosevelt era of the early 1900s brings us back spiritually in his speak of manifest destiny and others, back to that moment over 100 years ago, where the United States is in open and vigorous competition with Germany, with the UK, the expansionist powers and the imperial powers of Europe. Now we have both China, Russia, there's various world orders and other things that are emerging. And it's actually a sign of that return of geopolitics that probably we could take the most from it. I mean, Donald Trump will be the very first American president in 75 years to declare an open policy of expansionism in his inaugural address. We really should, consider that. The phrase manifest destiny and others has been uttered in terms of looking back to the founders. This is the first time in the post-World War II era that an American president taking the oath of office openly announces an expansion both from the Panama Canal, he didn't mention Greenland, but obviously Mexico there, while phrasing it similarly in terms of the peacekeeper. How will all that work out? I have no idea, obviously, and there's some huge questions, but spiritually, that's very important. And it actually, it fuses well, I think, with a lot of the politics. And that's why I often tell people, when you read a book, so much of our politics rhymes with that era of we have huge questions about immigration, hyphenation. What do we do about this with our society? We have big questions about our global. Do we want to be a global power? Do we want to just be a nation of farmers? Tariffs is the same thing. That was a huge question as the United States becomes rapidly industrializing and we became an exporting nation. How should we raise this? And then also the Gilded Age. And that's where we can also fuse that, and I think bring this full circle, where we have this extraordinary separation of wealth and of workers. And so, bringing all of those themes together, I just feel like, yes, look, nothing changes on a dime, but and we've known a lot of this for quite some time, but it does feel really, it hits home to me. Just it's very rare you get to live through a complete paradigm shift, and I think that this will be the beginning truly of that paradigm shift, and it raises a lot of really interesting questions about the United States, our role in the world, really who we are at home. We all get to decide that, and it was messy and it was brutal, and there was a lot of arguments that happened then, and so that's really like my big macro takeaway from the speech.
Well, in Saagar, one thing I think useful that frames it is we haven't mentioned he is now the oldest man to take the oath of office. Donald Trump is. So
yeah,
obviously,
right. Yeah.
Truly, like at the time of him taking the oath of office, he is 78 years old. And that, I think, is a huge fact, given the amount of time we've poured into discussing it in the context of Joe Biden, but also in the context of why Donald Trump has this sense that manifest destiny is what will return America to pride. This is make America great again to return to manifest destiny, to the Monroe Doctrine, to totally owning the hemisphere and not having China come into Panama, as he talked about. He said in the section on Panama, who did we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama. So now we're taking it back. And that is really interesting. The other thing I'll add, Saagar, both you and Krystal, I think, said something really, really wise about how it's a tide shifting moment. It's a paradigm shifting moment, but there's still so much unsettled. And in reference to the Lee Fong post that Krystal brought up, I just want to say, we have all talked to a lot of the people who spent the last half decade of their work in the Republican Party and the quote unquote broader conservative movement focused on antitrust and on the concentration of power in the hands of the people who are now at that stage, who are now sitting behind Donald Trump in front of some of the cabinet secretaries. And I'm pessimistic just by nature, and I think Donald Trump is making all of these signs that he's siding with Elon and Bezos, and he thinks that he has truly co-opted them because the culture war has sort of loosened up. Republicans feel like they spent years saying the cultural problems like DEI and whatever are downstream of economic concentration, but now that they feel like they've won the culture war, they're not so much concerned about economic concentration for all of the reasons that they should be, even though the culture stuff feels to them like it's solved. There are people going into this administration who do care. And I just want to say, I think part of what will be settled is going to be concentrated in this boring, wonky policy battle, specifically over antitrust behind closed doors. In the next several months, I think we'll get an idea of what's about to happen when it comes to how much power those oligarchs actually have versus the 30-something, 40-something-year-old staffers and law school graduates who are now roaming the halls.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
I think we probably know the answer to that if past experience of DC holds. Emily, I know you got to jump. Thank you as always for your
Emily.
Great insights.
Thanks, guys.
We love you. And everybody, Emily will be on Counterpoints Wednesday, like normal, with Ryan. All good stuff. We'll see you then.
See you guys.
That's right. See you, Emily.
I think Emily makes a very important point there about I'm cynical, and I think most of the people on the right, not all, most on the right, who postured as caring about concentration of wealth and power really only cared about the cultural domination and wokeism and, censorship that they perceived as going disproportionately against conservatives. And we're right about that at times. And once that's done, and you could see this with like the Elon Musk takeover of Twitter, right? Well, now that it's our billionaire that owns Twitter and is censoring in the way that we want him to, then we're comfy with it. And I think Trump has sort of, he's embraced that. And that's why there was a significant portion of the speech that was about wokeism and DEI and in the military and all that sort of stuff.
Censorship too.
Because I mean, the censorship, he's full of shit on censorship, but whatever. But you know, those are pieces that the entire coalition can agree with. And all of the talk of, you know, Matt Gaetz is a Lena conservative and JD Vance is going to be on board with, he likes Lena Khan, blah, blah, blah. Well, Lena Khan is out of the job now. Like, that's done. It's over. And I fully expect these guys to get what they effectively paid for. So, I mean, it's a two-way street, right? It's beneficial for Trump. So in that way, he loves having them there, having bent the knee, all that sort of stuff. But they also are going to get quite a lot out of the deal. And, you know, got quite a lot out of the Biden administration too. Like, all of those men are wildly wealthier now than they were before the Biden administration. They're wildly wealthier now than they were even when, you know, Donald Trump won the election just a few months ago. This, to me, is one of the central issues of our era. And that's why, you know, especially as crypto takes off and is one more vehicle for a massive upward transfer of wealth, AI takes off, is another vehicle for a massive upward transfer of wealth. And the guys who have their hands on the controls are the beneficiaries of that, you know, massive heist from the American public and the global public too.
What you'll find interesting, Krystal, is the talk of the town right now from over the weekend is not just about antitrust. It really is actually about AI. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because one of the under-noticed stories of the last couple of days is that Sam Altman actually briefed Donald Trump's incoming advisors about an alleged breakthrough in ChatGPT technology to establish PhD level intelligence. Now, Sam Altman has tried to pour cold water on this, but, you know, crypto is nothing compared to artificial intelligence and then the leaps in that. And that because all of those men that were behind Donald Trump, I guess kind of with the exception of Elon, are deeply invested and have poured tens of billions into artificial intelligence.
Well, Elon's in that world too with Grok. I mean, he's clearly making
not quite the same.
Well, and he started OpenAI with Sam Altman and is now trying to make his play to be a competitor to him. So I would put him in the same camp.
Yes, but it's not, to me, it's just not industrial as much. Like, look, Grok, it's fine, but like, it's not ChatGPT, it's not Claude, it's not Perplexity, right? It's not like one of these big players. It's not Google, it's not Facebook. All of those companies have gone so hard with AI that what they're the most fearful of is actually government policy around that. And that's why I think a lot of eyes should be on David Sachs, Sriram Krishnan, and others who are working with the White House under Michael Kratsios around the policies surrounding AI, about questions in terms of open source, and also in terms of what the standards will be in interpretation of data. Trump did not use the phrase AI, but he did make some, you know, allusions to technology. It could be, you know, in the way that we look back on the Clinton era, what's the one thing that sticks out? The internet, right? I was at the White House recently, and there was photos of Clinton sending his very first email. And I think that that's very possible, you know, a photo or a visual of Donald Trump chatting live or something with AI. And by the end of these 4 years, it could look totally different technologically in the way that 96 was an internet revolution compared to 92. Focusing specifically on what those guys want with the heavy level of investment from Amazon, Google, and others, the potential questions about breakup is really important. I will say, like I said, I alluded to, Steve Bannon has really been the person on the outside to take that dissident view, Krystal, of these technology oligarchs against Elon, against Mark Zuckerberg. And look, as we also can see here, things change with Trump all the time. You're only one tweet away, as Vivek can show us, from being shunted to the gubernatorial race in Ohio. I don't think the same will apply to Elon per se, but Trump enjoys toying with Mark Zuckerberg and Bezos. I have no idea yet, you know, what that policy will look like. And even if what the Department of Justice policy on antitrust, as you said, will be, because the explicit ones will be, and they have real binary choices to make. Do we continue to pursue this case against Google or not? Do we continue to pursue this case against Facebook or not? Now, obviously, they are all praying that they don't. Many of them were started under the first Trump administration, and many of those lawyers are now back working under Donald Trump, equally distrustful and hateful of those technology figures who were there and embraced by Trump. Now, Trump is the decider. We have no idea which way it will go in that direction, which is why I think there's still so many major open questions right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the AI guys and the crypto guys like basically bought both parties and won. Like there was with regard to crypto, and these things are kind of tied together because it's some of the same cast of characters, yes, but right. You're right. The AI is the bigger deal, and it doesn't get talked about nearly enough. The amount of resources that all of these companies are flowing into AI, the amount of data centers that are the amount of compute. I mean, and this is also massively impactful in terms of carbon emissions and that as well. But and the U.S. government being a major player in this, and the Chinese government being a major player, there is an ongoing massive arms race in AI development. And effectively, I think that the people who want, by and large, unfettered AI development have won. I think Kamala was going to go in the same direction. This isn't even a partisan point, but Trump with all of these guys behind them just really underscores that that's the era that we live in now. And you're right about, I actually think perhaps the better comparison isn't to the 90s and the development of the internet. It's more to the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, you might be right.
And how disruptive, that is a very live possibility, that the level of disruption that we saw in like an Industrial Revolution, where you truly have people, leaving the farm and surge into the cities, and all of this new like low paid, exploitative, all that chaos that was generated by that shift to industrialization. That's what we're looking at in a blink of an eye, like in a much shorter time period. And what's disturbing to me is that there is no even semblance of a democratic process around that, right? It's a handful of people who even know what's going on, who even know what sorts of decisions are being made. And the types of people who are techno-optimists, who by and large see the upside and aren't really weighing the downside risk. And that, I think, is, to me, as I'm watching these players and these characters and who Trump is listening to and all of that, and, David Sachs and Mark Andreessen and Elon himself, like, that's the part that I am maybe most concerned about in the Trump administration. And it's the battle that is playing out under the surface that gets almost no talk time from him or any of the other politicians. And it's deeply anti-populist. It's deeply elite, because these are truly a small group of like masters of the universe types who are making decisions that will have massive reverberating consequences for all of us. Just to give one more example, the Sam Altman thing is really important. And, yes, for people who don't know the backs, like he and Elon, they started OpenAI together, and they had a falling out, and they're rivals, and they sort of like hate each other, but then they're kind of like frenemy. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, Sam was always a big Democratic giver. He also gave $1 million and was at the Trump inauguration as well. So he wants his seat at the table too. But, in any case, the ChatGPT development is really important. But there's also been research that has come out that has already shown ChatGPT and a bunch of these other LLMs engage in what's called scheming, where if you try to say, okay, well, now you're going to have a different goal, they will lie to you. They will sandbag. They will copy themselves onto a different server to try to protect themselves. Like, that's already the level that we're at. And I don't feel like anyone is really grappling with that. So that's one of the things that I'm very, concerned about, not just because it's Donald Trump in office, but because these guys have so much money and so much influence that they basically have already won the war and are going to get everything they want.
Right. And that's the point, right, is not only about, just like the Industrial Revolution, there was no conscious policy about it. We react to it after it already happens. And I think that's probably basically the case here. And that's where those fights inside of the admin and the theories about setting a baseline or even thinking about economic concentration and others are going to be the biggest questions for them to handle. And, just kind of wrapping generally like my overall thoughts with the inauguration and with the set policies put forward, I think that what I'm struck most is by how much the Republican Party has changed. Is not just to see J.D. Vance, who was outsider, now the vice president of the United States, after just a 2-year stint in the United States Senate. He went from writing a book and hanging out with idiots like me to literally being the vice president. And now,
well, being feted by CNN and the New York Times as well.
That's right.
Don't forget,
no, you're not
guy.
wrong. You're not wrong. And then he changed just, completely. And now he has become a Trump warrior and the inheritor of, I think, we'll see, maybe Trump Jr. wants it. Well, I'm sure that'll be a fight later, but probably the inheritor of the Trump coalition. He's the first, by the way, we've explicitly moved over Gen X. So thank God for that. We went straight from boomer to millennial, and I think that's great. I hope that the Democrats don't choose a Gen
Ryan
Xer.
In this one.
No. Yeah, we're millennials, Krystal. You have to stand up for our cohort. We're just as big as the boomers, and we deserve power. Gen X, you suck. All you gave us was friends. Anyways, moving past that, what we see with the Republican Party is that there's no Jeff Flake, there's no John McCain, there's no Paul Ryan. This is Speaker MAGA Mike Johnson. This is John Thune, who, yes, has more establishment ties. I watched an interview that he gave this morning, and it was totally in support of Donald Trump. Mitch McConnell is gone. The no votes are gone. And the unanimity which way they will be able to govern is going to be, in my opinion, their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. So when they hit it out of the park and they're going to be able to actually pass things, it will be good. However, all presidents, especially those in Trump's position, overreach, and they end up finding themselves in big problems. So, for example, George W. Bush comes into office. Let's be honest, it was because people were afraid of 9/11 and Iraq. And he's like, you know what? The American people have given me a mandate to privatize Social Security. Insane. Goes for it. Disaster, Krystal. It was a huge part of why he lost the 2006 midterms. FDR, same thing. 1936, people think he's a king. He thinks he's a king. And he's like, I'm going to reform the Supreme Court. Boom. Total backlash towards that one. And Trump is very much in that position right now. It will be, so his ability, actually, just like those two presidents who had popular mandates, and to then use that mandate, but instead misinterpret it possibly, which most do, can often lead to big thermostatic changes in public opinion. And that's why, in my opinion, the most important thing for Trump and them is don't misread the mandate. And second is competence. The reason he lost the Oval Office in 2020 was the feeling of chaos with COVID. And he barely lost 40,000 votes, right? So this time around, if you're the same shit show feeling, it will be detrimental to Republican chances going forward into his overall popularity.
Well, because there's a dichotomy right now. And Ezra Klein actually wrote, I thought, a pretty good piece on this in the New York Times. You probably saw it as well, where, you know, on the one hand, it's like Trump won one of the most narrow popular vote victories in history. It was a 1.5, right? So by historical standards, not a landslide. We're not talking about, you know, Reagan's reelect or anything like that. On the other hand, the vibe shift has been definitive, right? I mean, just look at those people sitting on the stage, right? All the young bros, like the cultural figure, Carrie Underwood up there singing after he gives his speech. The vibe shift has been incredibly significant. So you're left with this sense of an I can do anything overwhelming mandate. And the Supreme Court has said, like, criminally, you can basically do anything, and there's no checks in place, and nobody wants to stand up to him. Even the Democrats don't really want to stand up to him this time. So you've got, on the one hand, all of this power, and on the other hand, the country is still quite narrowly divided. Yes. And it can go in the other direction very, very quickly. So, you know, it really is quite a fascinating political moment, you might say, in terms of, you know, what it's going to mean and how this is going to look like moving forward. And even on things like, you know, he thinks, and there's a lot of data to support this, that his immigration, you know, very like hardline immigration policy has been embraced by the public. And if you ask the public, like, we'll probably cover the polling tomorrow, mass deportation, they're like, yes, let's go. But then if you ask them more details about how that looks and, you know, how that goes, there's a lot more trepidation about what that actually looks like in real life when you are dealing with not just theoretical, sure, get the bad guys out, but the reality of, like, people who are sympathetic or who have been here for a long time, or deploying the military to the border and having this, militarized situation, it gets a lot dicier. So there is a danger for Republicans of overreaching and overreading the mandate. One last point I wanted to make about Biden and the corporate concentration and the antitrust and stuff like that. And it's both a compliment and a criticism of Joe Biden and that administration. There were things that were done that were genuinely good, right? Lena Khan, Jonathan Cantor, actually being serious about antitrust, actually being serious about labor and, some of the things that were done at the National Labor Relations Board. Those things were genuinely good. However, because you have a president in Joe Biden, who is so aged and so unable to articulate or understand basic things, there is never even an effort made to enlist the American public in a story of why those actions are important. So, they successfully sued Google. There's now an open question of Google could be broken up. That is monumental. Have you heard Joe Biden say anything about that until his last...
He can't.
His last speech, he's like, "Oh, I'm concerned about oligarchy." He's like, "Oh, well, what did you do?" Yeah. I'm concerned about these tech giants. It's like, okay, but and you know what? You have some credibility. Your administration did do some things in that regard, but you ended up with the worst of all worlds because now all the tech billionaires hate you and are going to do everything they can to make sure you're out of office. And the public was never enlisted in this project and never understood what you were even doing, let alone how it could better their lives. And also, by the way, you can't just do that, which is a longer term project. You also have to deliver for people materially in the short term. So that's part of how these tech billionaires won such an overwhelming victory, and why if Kamala had been elected, I think the policies would have looked similar to what Trump is ultimately going to do here. But, Trump with the embrace of all these guys, it's very clear, is this attempt to... if you come at the king, you best not miss. Biden came at these kings and was not forceful enough, was not able to enlist the American public in this project. And now the project is basically dead.
Yeah, I could write an entire book about the failures of Joe Biden. I think that's a good point. Basically, one of the problems with having unpopular presidents for various reasons is that all of the other stuff attached to them dies as well. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people who supported many things, actually know a lot of evangelical Christians who will tell you that George W. Bush is the worst thing that ever happened to them because his disastrous war in Iraq sank many of the Christian right policies that they supported. Now, I disagree with them, but politically, I think that they're correct. That's a huge reason, exactly like you said. And then there's also a big question here of what does victory look like? The thing is, Trump's cultural and vibe victory, specifically over young guys, has been so extraordinary, so overwhelming, and so different than last time around. I'm still honestly coming to grips with it. I still don't even know what it really means, what even victory is. To them, all they care about is when he owns libs, right?
Right.
There's a lot of people, though. It's not just vibe. There's a lot of people, though, who did vote, on material grounds. There's a lot of people who do pay attention. And those people also, I think, will be the great swing voters of America. I think the Bro Coalition will always stick with Donald Trump. He is, this uber-mentioned figure. If you think philosophically and just fight is going to endure with that generation, I think, forever. In the same way, Reagan was a cultural icon more than a political figure to an entire generation of guys. But what you watch is how quickly that can dissipate and be destroyed under George H.W. Bush. So victory for Reagan is not victory for the Republican Party and vice versa. I guess just thinking broadly here about Trump and about the first 100 days will be the ultimate test of all of these questions. It's not just going to be about technology, of course, which is very important. Immigration will be the big test for them as well. Will the public support, endure, and go along with? We have immigration raids scheduled for tomorrow in Chicago and elsewhere. This will be the first.
Apparently, they pulled back from Chicago after the details leaked. Okay. But I think the expectations are still there will be some significant immigration raid somewhere.
There will be an immigration raid somewhere in this country, and there will be, ride-alongs and media appearances and things like that. which will dominate our news waves. Well, let's see. You know, I look, I have beliefs. Obviously, we've hashed it out a million times. I'm curious too. I'm like, let's see it. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
We've still got big question marks here about who's going to take over Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. In terms of their confirmation hearings, and there could be fights about that. So I believe that these first 100 days will be a big test for thermostatic public opinion, and I have a very close eye on the Democratic Party and then also on the Democratic voters. The resistance was a natural phenomenon last time. It doesn't exist right now. I'm curious to see if it can reform and what the general theory of opposition to Donald Trump and the various forms that it will take. So it's a crazy moment here in Washington. That's all I could really say.
Yeah, no, in terms of the resistance, the liberals are really are in disarray. I think many feel betrayed by some of the elite, especially media figures that they trusted. I mean, you mentioned before, Saagar, Joe Biden being like, "Welcome home, Trump." I mean, Joe Biden may not have really believed he was a fascist and end of democracy,
right,
but the liberal base really did and really does. So they feel betrayed on a lot of levels. And I was mentioning before, you know, I think part of why the Democratic Party feels less inclined to resist and fight, there's a variety of factors, but one of them is they're kind of comfy with this like oligarchy thing. They've been cozying up to these billionaires the same way. You had the lead candidate for DNC chair, Ken Martin, be like, well, yeah, we're going to still raise money from our good billionaires. We're just going to stay away from the bad billionaires, which is like, of course, his definition of a good billionaire is one that gives to the Democratic Party versus, you know, maybe the country and the party should not be owned by billionaires whatsoever. Maybe that's ultimately the direction to go in. So, I think that there's going to be a reckoning, which will probably occur bits and starts over the next 4 years, but certainly in the next Democratic primary presidential contest. That's really a fight for the soul and the direction of the Democratic Party. And, you know, in terms of the whether some similar resistance is going to arise, they're figuring out who they trust, what they believe, what view of politics makes sense, because, you know, the version that was sold to them of like resist on the grounds of Russiagate and, you know, the high-minded democracy talk, which I don't personally disagree with the threat that Donald Trump poses, but this was clearly inadequate to the task. The legal cases were clearly inadequate to the task. So they're kind of regrouping and figuring out, okay, well, if that didn't work, what could work to fight back against this political force that we're opposed to. So, Saagar, I don't know if I think we lost Saagar. So in any case, we were coming to wrap here in any way. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching us on this live stream today as we watch President Donald Trump retake the Oval Office. What extraordinary times that we live in. It's going to be very interesting. Saagar and I are going to be back to cover, we're going to do another live stream tomorrow just because the news is coming in so fast and furious. So we want to make sure that we're as current as we possibly can covering all of this raft of executive orders that are going to be issued both today and tomorrow. So we'll be doing that live show again for you tomorrow just so we can make sure that we are on top of all of the news. But we appreciate you guys, and it's certainly going to be an interesting 4 years. See you soon.